So this week I wanted to talk about the word transition. I wanted to define it and explain it and its use. So the word transition is the verb used to describe the period of time in which a person is becoming their true self, that they're expressing themselves in a way that's congruent with their gender identity, that inner sense of self. So that is the verb to transition or transitioning. Transgender is an adjective. It is not a verb. So people do not transgender. They are not transgendering. They are transitioning. So that's the first important. The word transition is the verb. Now, if you're going to use this word to describe a person, I recommend that you have their permission. If you're going to talk about your child's transition, I recommend that you have their permission to discuss that first. Who do they want to tell? Because sometimes we would tell people that would never know. And is that okay? Because it's their life, their story. So always get permission first on who is it okay to tell? How is it okay to tell it? So oftentimes I'll check in and say, if I said this to explain and use whatever wording I use, does that sound does that sound right to you? Is that consistent with your experience? So when we talk about someone's transition, it's with their permission. And so you might say, this person or my child is transitioning when they're going through that period of time. If you were talking about somebody that has already transitioned, that's exactly it. They transitioned 10 years ago. Again, with their permission to talk about that. And a third way you might use the word transition is if you know somebody who has transitioned, but maybe let's say you knew them or you're referring to a time prior to their transition, that's exactly what you say. We met prior to their transition, or we met before they transitioned. That's assuming that the person you're talking to knows they transitioned and that you have permission to talk about that. Did I mention that you should have permission to talk about that? Just kidding. Okay. The last thing I want to say about transitions is really 4 types of transitions. There's a social transition, which is exactly that, changing the name, the pronouns, begin to change your expression, how the clothes you wear, the hair you use. That's a social transition. It's the only type of transition a child before puberty can have. It's the only option to them, maybe one other, and we'll get to that in a second. The second one is a medical transition, which is exactly what it sounds. You use some form of medication to assist, or medications to assist with the transition to be one's true self. The third kind is a surgical transition, exactly as it sounds. There are different types of surgeries that I'll get into in another time or within my own classes if you join. But a surgical transition, there's lots of different surgeries. Any one of them, or all of them, or a few of them, any combo of them is a surgical transition. And then the last one, which a friend of mine brought to my attention, is a legal transition. A legal transition is saving your documents. Maybe a child before puberty might be able to do some of these, but it's a legal name change. It's changing your social security card, changing your passport, changing your driver's license, changing your birth certificate. Many combo, all of the above, depending on what state you were born in. So many things to consider, but that would be a legal transition. So here's the most important thing about those different types of transition. What somebody needs to be their true self is not the same from person to person. It is not a linear thing that everyone that's going to transition is going to do all types of transitions. There are lots of different reasons. One is how someone sees themselves will determine what type of transition they want, and they need to be their true selves. The other thing is access to care, which is being affected a lot right now in our country. And then a third thing is the financial ability to pay for it. So there are different reasons why people have different types of care, different types of transitions, I mean. And so one way is not the way for everyone. And I think that's really important to understand about transitions. Have a great week.